So in part one, we walked through an overview of the weekly budget spreadsheet. In part two, we looked at what it looks like to overspend and then adjust some of our expenses. In this case, we adjust entertainment expenses and what we were putting back in savings to no longer be over budget. And then we were able to take any extra money that we had and we told every dollar where to go, which gave us zero based budgeting. In part three, I want to show you what it looks like to take that budget and compare it to what you actually did. So, a budget tells us what we should be spending each week on certain categories of things that we do in our daily lives. The categories I mentioned here: savings, your home expenses, daily living expenses, health and fitness, and so on and so forth. Now, what we actually spent might be different than a budget. So you might be thinking, then why do we budget? We budget because it gives us guardrails in showing us, hey, it looks like you might be overspending here because you budgeted for this for your groceries. You only budgeted maybe it was $75 or $100 a week for groceries, but it looks like you're spending $150 each week. So it gives us an idea of where we should be each week in each of the different spending categories. That's why it's important to start with a budget first. But once we start with the budget, we can't just end up there. We have to see what we actually did spend so that we could compare what we actually did to our budget and see if we need to make adjustments accordingly. So don't allow this spreadsheet to overwhelm you or intimidate you. Let me explain what this is doing. All this is showing you for week one what we budgeted, which is exactly the same on the prior sheet here, right? Versus what we actually spent. That's the only difference, along with what's the difference between what we budgeted versus what we actually spent. So that is what you see here, all right? You do not need to type in your budget numbers. As you can see, these cells are referencing the weekly budget zero based. So whenever you're going in to enter your budget, go to this weekly budget zero base, start entering your budget here. And then when you do that, those numbers will feed over into weekly budget versus actual spreadsheet. And you will only be concerned with entering information in the actual column. Don't worry about entering anything in difference. That will be calculated for you based on what you entered in actual and what you put in this weekly budget zero based spreadsheet tab. All right. So on this tab, we only need to enter what we actually made, our income, and any additional wages we made. As you can see, we've got gifts received of $20. So, and it looks like our side hustle made us $100 more than what we expected. See that difference of 100? And we actually made $50 more in our wages and income. Maybe we worked overtime or whatever it was. Maybe the company gave us a small bonus that week because of a good job that we did on a particular report, whatever it was. So that means we actually had $170 more in our income than what we expected. And so you can see that up here in our budget summary. But look at this, guys. It's showing that we spent $150 more in our expenses. Let's see where we did that. So it looks like we were budgeting, let's see, in our expenses. Let's see where we went over. See these neat little red numbers? You don't have to search too much in the spreadsheet because these numbers that are red are showing you how much we went over in our expenses. So as I mentioned earlier, groceries can get us. We went over $50 in our groceries. We went over $20 in dry cleaning because we didn't budget for that. So we went over $70 in daily living. Looks like we had to pay some tolls here, went over $5 in transportation and parking. And you keep scrolling down and you see that in week one, we went over in dining out and lunches that we bought that week. And that's what we went over in total, which meant that we went over $150. Now, you can see this here, this $7.69. It's just showing us the $7.69 that we put into our savings. We budgeted to put that in there, but it's showing that we didn't. And so it's showing that we didn't put that money in the savings. But once you put that money in savings, 769, you'll see that that part does zero out. And based on making a total income of $170 and overspending by 150, you still have 20 extra dollars left. And you can tell that $20 where to go. You can have that 20 extra dollars go into, let's just say, a sinking fund for our home and car. When we do that, you can see here we have zero-based budget, um, our budget, but also our actuals. All right. Don't worry about the difference here. This is just telling you the difference in what you expected to bring in versus what you actually spent. But we're really looking to make sure that our budget and our actuals are zero based. You will do this for each week, guys. And then once you do this for each week, you will find that in your month to date, you've got your budget here and your actual of $215 left over. You can zero base budget each week. So you can zero base budget this extra $10 from week two. If let's just say if we do that, let's go ahead and just do that so that you can see what it looks like. We're just going to, for the sake of simplicity, we're going to put 10 extra dollars in each of these different savings accounts. And let's see, well, 10 extra dollars in week two. And in week three, we'll put the $102.69. In week four, we will put the $102.77 because we're zero based budgeting throughout each week. Again, don't worry too much about this. This is just saying in week three, we spent more money and we shouldn't have. And then we also put some money in savings. But if you look at our budget versus our actual, we're zeroing everything out, all the extras that we had here. And it does show you that based on the month to date budget, you zeroed that out. Month to date actual, you zeroed that out. Now, the difference, remember, is just showing you the extra money that you've made versus the extra money that you've spent versus the money that you saved. And then, of course, it gives you the difference here. But we're really focused on making sure that these numbers have been zeroed out and that your actuals and your budgets are green. Can you see that? Your budgets and your actuals for each week are green and they are zeroed out down to the penny. All right, so that is what this spreadsheet is showing you. And if you look at the savings charts, you can see that we have our budgeted savings versus our monthly savings for the month of April, which is the month that we were looking at. Don't worry too much about the zeros in the charts. I left them there because once you start populating these values on these other pages that we showed here, our budget values here and our actuals, you're going to start to see this chart change. And those zero amounts will no longer be zero amounts, okay? So let's just leave it there for now. That way, if anything changes on the other tabs, it will reflect it in this chart. But as you can see, if you look at your emergency fund for the month of April, you budgeted to save $363.15. Okay, it shows you that's 43% of your budget, and you actually saved $345.38. Very close to what you wanted to save, but not quite. So this gives you a nice monthly view of what you wanted to do versus what you actually did. And this is just another way to look at the chart as a bar chart in case you don't like pie charts. Same thing on the expense chart. It's showing you what you spent versus what you um, budgeted to spend. And then also income. Maybe you had a goal to make a certain amount of income in your side hustle. You can see here that you budgeted to make a certain amount. I think it was $400, but you actually made $500. So you exceeded what you budgeted to make in your side hustle. So great job to this person in this example. And then finally, let's say, I want to actually look at my income versus my savings versus my expenses. You can see that this is how much you're making and this is how much you're spending versus how much you're saving. And this, again, is definitely another view of this. You can see here that you're budgeting $5,400 for your income, but you actually made $5,570 in your income. And then if you look at your savings, it shows you that you saved 880, which is a little bit over the 835 you expected to save. Of course, you did go over a little bit in your expenses. So it tells you that's something that you might want to watch out for. So these charts have been added just to give you a nice overview of how you ended up at the end of the month based on your income, your savings, and your expenses that you budgeted versus what you actually spent. Thank you for tuning in to this video. I do hope this has helped you in some way on helping you manage your budget better. Again, I am Tiffany Chanell with MoneyMakeoverMinistries.com.